welcome to Young Voices Debates. My name is Hikmat Matthew Abu Khater and I'm your host for tonight. I'm a Syrian-American libertarian who has a panache for debate, who has interest in debate, and realized that there's a lack of debate that specifically pertains to the topics that interest younger generations. So I decided to reach out to an organization called Young Voices and organize with them to launch this debate society, a monthly debate society. Every other month it's virtual, every other month it's live in New York City in Midtown Manhattan. And we were lucky enough to get the support of CiVL.com, the platform on which you are now watching this debate. CiVL.com is a live streaming and library, an archive of documentaries, debates, and excellent content on civic discourse and civil discourse in this specifically fraught moment that we are living as Americans. So without further ado, let me introduce to you the debate tonight. The topic at hand is the H-1B visa. It's been in the news quite often. It's been a subject of debate, especially with the return of the Trump administration. And to have this discussion today, we have an Oxford-style debate between two excellent debaters who are authorities on the topic. And we are going to introduce them to the stage and prepare you for an Oxford-style debate. All right, here we go. All right, so as I introduce the two debaters, I will invite the audience at home watching from CiVL.com, watching on X.com, and watching on YouTube to take their phones out and scan this following QR code. So the debate resolution, as is stated, the Trump administration should end the H-1B visa program. So at this point, please scan the QR code that you see in front of you on the screen and give us your vote, whether you agree, you disagree, or are unsure about the resolution at hand. And then once you do so, we will hear opening statements, we will hear rebuttals, and then we will hear 30 minutes of lively discussion and questions and answers between the two debaters, and then we will hear concluding remarks from the debaters, and you will get a chance to vote once more. And in an Oxford-style debate, the side that is able to convince more people to their argument wins the debate. So at this point, please go ahead again and scan this QR code and get those votes in as I introduce the debaters. For the proposition, defending the motion, we have Eduardo Neret. Eduardo is a conservative commentator, writer, and media consultant who has work that appeared on Fox News, Newsmax, Washington Examiner, Daily Caller, and Breitbart. In addition to his on-air media work, Neret also owns and operates his own media production consulting company. He has worked with people like Tulsi Gabbard and Tucker Carlson on his Tucker Carlson Tonight show. For the opposition, opposing the motion, we have Anurag Singh. Anurag is the managing partner at Ansett Capital, a limited partnership hedge fund based out of Chicago. Anurag is published extensively and at prominent international print media organizations on macroeconomic issues and the stock market in general. So with that, I will introduce the two debaters to the stage and make sure that we have concluded the first debates. Okay, the voting seems to be undergoing. Perfect. All right. So without further ado, let me introduce the two debaters. Here we go. All right, Eduardo, please take it away. You have 10 minutes for your opening statement for the proposition. Please take it away.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eduardo Neret. I'm really glad to be here tonight to debate, of course, one of the very important issues that has been in the national conversation over the last few weeks, and that is the H-1B, or so-called highly skilled visa. My position this evening will be very clear. The H-1B program was created and predicated on a lie. The program is being used to hurt American workers, and thus it must be shut down. In 1990, Congressman Bruce Morrison of Connecticut, who sponsored the bill that created the H-1B, promised that the law would help fill, quote, the need for skilled workers to be brought to the United States for jobs that are not being filled and will not be filled in the near future by American workers. President George H.W. Bush echoed those sentiments when he signed the H-1B into law. stating that the new law would bring, quote, skilled individuals to meet our economic needs. But it was a false idea, this idea that the United States, just months away from winning the Cold War and emerging as the globe's singular superpower, simply lacked the human talent to innovate and compete with the rest of the world. And yet somehow we are expected to believe that more than 30 years after the H-1B was created, those shortcomings in the United States still exist. There is no disputing today that the United States has the world's leading economy. We have the best institutions and the best universities. But again, somehow, we just haven't figured out, we are expected to believe, that we haven't figured out how to train Americans in the last 30 years. Instead, we are told that our successes have been in spite of our own people's shortcomings. It's, of course, a laughable and ridiculous notion. So how did we get here? In the early 1990s, stakeholders that purported to represent actual scientists, like the National Science Foundation, the National Academy of Sciences, and others, pushed phony studies that ignored immigration's effects on wages and market dynamics. And they used these studies to argue that there was a need for increased immigration in STEM fields. These groups ended up advocating for employers over the very scientists whose interests they claimed to represent. As noted mathematician and former managing director of Thiel Capital, Eric Weinstein, has noted, the American research and science industry was then, as a result, flooded with foreign trainees, students, and postdoctorates who could be paid less than Americans in the scientific workforce. Even a generous interpretation of the circumstances that led to the H-1B's creation, in other words, even if you think that maybe in a couple of areas we lacked in science and in talent, and that as a short-term fix, Congress should have created a temporary measure for us to catch up, so to speak, what could possibly justify this program's existence some 30 years later? There isn't a single reason that I can think of. And none of this is to say, by the way, that truly skilled and exceptional talent can't benefit the United States. We have actually seen how our country has benefited from this throughout history. Programs like the Manhattan Project and Operation Paperclip help us target specific individuals who are already distinguished in their fields. But that's not what the H-1B is doing. Far from it. It's not bringing us anywhere near the world's best and brightest talent. What it is doing is bringing us desperate nationals from a few countries, primarily India, who cannot find opportunities in their own home countries. 75% of H-1B visas go to Indian nationals, so it is in effect a glorified jobs program for that country. The visa has also facilitated the offshoring of U.S. jobs, with Indian IT outsourcing companies known as body shops dominating the list of top H-1B sponsors. So the program isn't bringing in top-tier innovators. Instead, it's a mechanism that is undermining domestic job markets and reducing opportunities for highly qualified American workers. And it isn't just reducing opportunity for future Americans. The program has actually helped employers displace and discriminate against existing American tech workers. Don't take it from me. Here's some of the testimonies from those individuals. Lori Agel, a former AIG worker, told CBS News in the mid-90s, quote, "We were told if we did not train them, in other words, the H-1B replacements, we would not get our severance pay. How do you come to work every day and train someone for your job?" Jennifer Weddle, wife of former Texas Instruments engineer, once told former President Obama that, quote, "My husband has an engineering degree with over 10 years of experience, and he was laid off 3 years ago and has yet to find a permanent job in his field." She went on to say, question, "Why does the government continue to issue and extend H-1B visas when there are tons of Americans just like my husband with no job?" And lastly, Lou Perro, former Disney employee, he testified before Congress, quote, "Your jobs have been given over to a foreign workforce. In the meantime, you'll be training your foreign replacements until your jobs are 100% transferred over to them." He went on to say, "I clearly remember going to the local church pumpkin sale and having to tell the kids I couldn't buy any that year because my job was being turned over to a foreign worker." These are just a few of the testimonies from Americans who have been negatively affected by the H-1B program, and unfortunately, their stories aren't unique. The U.S. Census Bureau now reports that almost 3/4 of American STEM graduates don't even work in STEM jobs, and of course, why would they? The decline in prestige, support, and compensation in STEM fields since the late 90s has led to a shift in who pursues and excels in these fields. Now, historically, American students have always been prominent in STEM, but now they're being outpaced by students from other backgrounds, like I said before, primarily from India and China, due to systemic issues like low pay and exploitation. The entire industry has also been commercialized. Researchers who make groundbreaking discoveries are often overshadowed by wealthy individuals who stand to capture the value from those discoveries, like billionaires and venture capitalists. So it's no wonder why the largest pushers of H-1Bs are billionaire CEOs, immigration lawyers, universities, again, individuals who stand to capture the most dollar value from scientific discoveries. There's also been little wage growth in STEM over the last few years. According to the Center for Immigration Studies, STEM compensation grew at just 0.15% between 2008 and 2023, which is insane. I mean, considering this is an industry that has seen surging demand for tech workers and tremendous growth overall in the industry in that time span. So it's not hard to see how Americans with STEM degrees have realized they can make more money elsewhere, like in law, finance, other fields. Now, supporters of the H-1B program often incorrectly cite successful immigrant entrepreneurs like Sergey Brin of Google, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, and Peter Thiel of PayPal as examples of H-1B beneficiaries. But none of these individuals arrived in the US under the H-1B. They arrived here as children and were raised just like any other American kid would have been raised in those years, through our education system and with our culture. And of course, there are some notable figures like Sundar Pichai and Satya Nadella who may have used the H-1B program, but they are exceptions rather than the rule. And their success stories should not be used to generalize the overall impact or effectiveness of the H-1B program. In fact, in the case of Sundar Pichai, it's worth noting that he joined an existing tech powerhouse in Google. He rose through the company's corporate ranks just like any other talented American could. And while his success is of course admirable, it's not like Sundar Pichai invented or created anything. I mean, are his contributions worth importing hundreds of thousands of cheaper tech workers in the hopes that one of them turns out to be a tech CEO? I mean, does anyone truly believe that Google wouldn't be where it is today as a company without Sundar Pichai or the H-1B? Of course not. And if anything, the admittance of someone like Pichai on an H-1B and the disparity between him and, say, your average entry-level H-1B worker is evidence why the program is problematic. And that's because the entire selection process is based on a random lottery. There is no preference given to workers with higher wages or higher skills. Secondly, contrary to popular belief, employers are not required to prove they first attempted to hire an American. Thirdly, the labor condition application, LCA process, through which employers attest to paying H-1B workers at least the prevailing wage, operates on an honor or trust me system. So obviously, employers are exploiting this. They're making their own wage surveys and using those as justification to pay H-1B workers less than market rates. The Department of Labor is only reviewing LCAs for accuracy, not for fairness, and they cannot scrutinize them once they are approved. So it's a rubber stamp operation. Now to close, because I know we have a lot to get here to tonight, the H-1B program, ultimately what it comes down to, is a program that is fundamentally designed to help employers legally replace Americans with cheaper and more compliant foreign labor. And for those who say we need the best and brightest to come here, well, we already have a program that does that, and it's called the O Visa, which targets exceptionally talented individuals, not just anyone willing to come here on lower wages. The H-1B program has become so reviled by Americans that it became a major focus of President Trump's original 2016 campaign for president. Trump, to his credit, understands that any policy pushed by the US government, including immigration, should be to the benefit of the American people, not to a couple of multinational corporations in Silicon Valley, and not to the benefit of other countries like India or its workers. Sorry, America doesn't exist to serve them. We are not just an economic zone. We are a country with our own history, our own culture, and our own people. And if we really want to remain competitive in the future, it's time we recognize and nurture the talent within our own borders. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. At this point, Anurag, take it away for your 10-minute opposition opening statement. Please start over. I just unmuted you. Go ahead, Anurag.
Sure. So, well, first of all, thank you, Hekmat, for this opportunity to make the case for H-1B. And by the way, we heard a very spirited debate and spirited, very valid arguments, by the way, from Eduardo. Right, but before we jump to conclusions, and I think Eduardo has covered quite a bit, and I think most of that is correct, by the way, so you can debate either side, but the facts are correct on the table. Let me just take the broader view and let me address 4 big questions, right, before we come to how do we conclude on this debate, right? These 4 questions provide you a big picture, will help people understand what does the immigration to US look like, okay? So question number 1, by the way, how many immigrants does US take every year legally? The answer is about 1 million, right? So for the past, and this number is steady since 1989. So for the past 35 years, US has accepted legally 35 million immigrants, right? Which is 35 million green cards were issued. Eventually, most of them become citizens, right? Now, you would tend to think that US selects the best and the brightest in this 1 million every year, correct? That's the assumption? The answer is absolutely not. And you'll be shocked that it is quite the opposite. Let's look at the buckets at which US issues the green cards every year. 1 million, by the way. Biggest 65% goes to family-sponsored, family-based green cards. By the way, this is through marriage, brothers, parents, sisters, spouses, etc. Now the spouse is a different family and she can invite their brothers, their sisters, their friends, sorry, not friends, but parents, kids, who in turn can invite their own in-laws and, their brothers and sisters. This is an endless chain. It never ends unless the family decides to end it. Believe it or not, this is the easiest and the biggest way to migrate to US legally today. 65% of 1 million, which is about 650,000, goes to family-based chain migration. Let's come to the next one. The big 20% category is green cards that are issued to asylum and refugee applicants and diversity quotas. Another 200,000 number gone out of 1 million. So where we are at 650,000 to family and then another 200 to refugee, asylum, diversity. Can anybody in their sane senses make a reasonable argument that US is getting the best and the brightest talent under these categories? I have my serious doubts on that. Maybe some are, but most are not. Forget this, most even can't speak the language, forget the talent. Now that leaves us with what? Just about 15%. So in a 1 million that US lets every year, just about 15% is broadly what we can categorize as skilled-based immigration, which is employment-based immigration. To be precise, that number is actually 14%, is 140,000 per year. That's the number we are looking at. This brings us to the second question. Where do these immigrants come from? Where are they coming from? Let me just quote you some more numbers that will shock you, surprise you based on where you stand. Remember this 1 million number? Let's look at the number breakdown. Mexico sent 180,000. Now there's the 2023 data. That's the latest USCIS data. 180,000 come from Mexico. Cuba sends 80,000. India 78,000. Dominican Republic 68,000. Bangladesh and Venezuela 40,000. Haiti, Guatemala, Honduras 45,000 more. Afghanistan 30,000. This is 500,000 right there. You think now, except for this 10 to 15,000, which might be through H-1B, etc., most of this 500,000 rest, I think minus 10,000, 12,000, largely would be from India mostly. Rest are all family-based chain migration / refugees / asylum. With due respect to all the countries, can you ever make a sound case that this is how we should migrate people to US? Absolutely not. Is this how we are going to build the global talent pool? I don't think. I have serious doubts. Brings us to question number 3, which is specific to H-1B. Now, remember this 15% that I said out of 1 million, 140,000, which is skill-based. Let's split into two parts. There is a good 5%, which is 30, 40,000. That is Eduardo mentioned, top talent, right? It's called first preference. It is meant for outstanding researchers, professors, multinational executive, Nobel laureates, people of repute, you name it, right? They're all there. They have this 5%. But remember, this is just 40 to 50,000 out of 1 million. In a good year, Afghanistan refugees can beat this number. Rest 10,000, which is 10%, which is 100,000 out of 1 million, actually are allocated to H-1B broadly, give or take, okay? Now, H-1B is for skilled workers, advanced degrees, person of exceptional ability. I understand the visa had a designed purpose. Eventually, there is a misuse that has crept in. There's no doubt about it. We can talk about it. But of the 85,000 H-1B visas that are issued every year, you want to stop this entire category? I think that's not a good idea. Brings us to the last question, which is a bit debatable, but I think we'll not do the debate or TV style where we'll just make one-sided arguments, right? Let's acknowledge, okay, oh, by the way, I'm talking of some other channels, Eduardo, right? So I don't want to name them, but we know some of them, right? So I'm going to acknowledge where the fault lines are, right? And after all, what is the fuss about? Why is this debate if this is not H-1B is working so great? Well, the fact is certain cracks have emerged. And otherwise, in this otherwise very well-designed merit-based visa, I'll be honest, a big crack has emerged. 75% of the visas go to Indians. Eduardo mentioned that the number is perfectly correct. It is happening every year, year over year. Now, India certainly has talent, no doubt about it. But does 75% of the global talent reside in India? I have my serious questions on that, right? The obvious answer is no. So what happened here? Simple answer is the visa got misused. Many tech services from India and even the consultants who are based in US leverage this, loophole to send H-1B workers on a cost arbitrage basis. And of course, aside of that, 150,000 students come from India every year. They come on a student visa, but they also join the line of H1B. So ultimately, it's a crowding out. It's a full crowd now today. Is it fair to assume some workers are being undercut on wages? Some American workers are undercut on wages by the H1B? Of course, absolutely. My sense is about 25% of H1B are actually undercutting American workers. We can debate over the numbers later, but this is true. Okay, if we have to take a stand now with this big picture, look, you have two buckets, right? There is only sliver of 10% which is coming through H1B. Yes, there is misuse, but where is, misuse is there in almost every category. You think all the refugees and asylees are not, they're genuine asylees, they're not, right? So I understand misuse have to be plugged, but there is the sliver 10%, which is still skill-based, which are still STEM grads, which are still educated. And on the other hand, there's this 85%, which has absolutely no control, no language, no skills, no education. We have no control over that, right? My message is, if in the entire pathways, that I laid out, your energies are best utilized if they're diverted elsewhere on the rest of the 85%. This is not the hill that, you want to die on. Thank you, Hekmat.
Thank you, Anurag. Okay, at this point, we will open it up for rebuttals. But as we hear the rebuttals from both the proposition and opposition, I invite everyone who's watching at home to start sending in questions, because we are nearing the questions and answers period of our debate. So anything that you heard from both debaters that you want to comment on, or you want the debaters to expound upon, go ahead and send a message to all those who are watching on CiVL, on X, and on YouTube. All right, Eduardo, please take it away. You have 5 minutes for your rebuttal.
Sure. Well, it seems like my opponent's argument is primarily focused on the fact that we are only, as if it's a bad thing, letting in 1 million people in a year, and that we need to do more. But in order for him to argue that, you'd have to explain why the number we're letting in now isn't good enough, how it's not helping our country, and how more would help our country. And I'm so far, I haven't heard him put forth that argument. I mean, as it is, with the 1 million legal immigrants we have a year and the many, many millions more coming illegally into this country, Americans have been hurt by that. I mean, look at the cost of living across the country. Wages have been stagnant for decades. So sure, does it help a couple corporations, big corporations who don't want to raise wages for Americans? Yes. But again, if you're going to put forth the argument that we need to even increase the already out of control immigration that we have, you need to explain specifically how that would help the American people. And then also, for his argument about how we need to expand, if anything, this so-called skilled base immigration, I would point you to the United Kingdom and Canada. They have a more liberal immigration system than us. They have effectively done in policy what is known as stapling green cards to diplomas. In other words, allowing anyone to come study at their universities, and then if someone graduates, they'll get a green card and then they can stay in the country forever. And look at how it's turned out for them. I mean, the United Kingdom's growth is stagnant. Canada is in an awful state economically, so much so that Trudeau is now going back on that program. They found thousands and thousands of what are called degree mills. In other words, you had foreign nationals showing up to Canada to go to these fake universities, and the government literally doesn't even know where many of these people are. Again, people they ostensibly let in to study at their universities and contribute to their economies and stuff like that. So we've already seen other countries around the world try this. It has failed. And then the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to my opponent, if we are to believe that in this idea that immigration is some sort of superpower, in other words, whoever takes in the most immigrants will be the most powerful nation in the world and will overtake anybody else. Why isn't anybody else doing that? I mean, if the key to China overtaking the United States was, all we have to do is let in 10 million people a year from around the world, or if all Russia had to do was let in millions of people from all over the world to overtake Europe, don't you think they would have done that already? I mean, the people running China and Russia and some of our adversaries are not stupid leaders. They know what they're doing. And in fact, China has already overtaken us in many ways. You just look at the recent DeepSeek overtaking our AI program, OpenAI, here in the United States. And they didn't do that by importing millions and millions of cheaper tech workers from around the world. So for some reason, this is only something we believe in the United States, that the more people we bring in, the stronger we'll get. And it's an idea so simple, you have to wonder why the rest of the world isn't doing it.
Thank you, Eduardo. Anurag, you have 5 minutes. Take it away.
Yeah. Okay, so good points, like all good points. By the way, I'm not recommending that we increase this 1 million. It is already too high. I think, if anything, I think last 35 years, we've got, 35 million, that's 10% of the US population, and with no control over their skills and education, most of it, right? So I'm not recommending. It's way too high. By the way, I also don't understand, and I think it's pretty flawed logic on economics if people try and say, hey, immigration is good. I mean, it is good in a context, in a certain scenario, but doesn't mean every immigration and all the time it is good, right? It's not. Logical point there is that immigration might increase collectively the overall GDP, but that doesn't mean that individually people are getting richer. They are not. In fact, they might be actually getting poorer. Okay, so there is that. By the way, if you do hit a problem, do you hit the 20% problem or 15% in this case, or do you hit the 90%, 80% problem? I think the energies are focused on H-1B because it is impacting the white collar jobs. I understand that. However, the country is almost nearly being raided by like 5 million illegals and then 850,000 through family route, which should, I think, it's ultimately, it's a question of what is the kind of people you are getting in. A democracy is only as smart as the people that participate in the democracy, right? We understand that, right? So eventually I'm saying the energies have to look both sides, right? Look, there are flaws, but let's look at where the bigger problem is. And we should control that, right? By the way, we'll come to the birthright citizenship, but that might itself solve a number of these issues, right? Which is an exception to US. If that stands, I think that might itself kill a number of problems on immigration. The other is, I think, have you looked at this context that every job is at a cost? It's not that if you fire an Indian guy there, the other guy will get double the money. The job will eventually flow outside US. So the point is, I take this argument that workers are being undercut, and that maybe is 25% of the point. But if you say, that everybody will be replaced by American worker tomorrow, no, the job will be headed back to India. Today, JP Morgan, American Express, Bank of America, they have like 50 to 60,000 people in their global capability centers in India. And that's happening because they can't do that work at this cost within US. So ultimately, if we are a knowledge-based economy and we are a free economy, I think we got to look at the cost equation as well. I understand the guys here doing a job, and probably that's a little unfair. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that once you send the guy back to his home country, the guy will be replaced by some local worker. Probably not. Probably the job will go outside.
All right, thank you both for the rebuttals. At this point, again, I want to remind everyone to ask questions through CiVL.com, through X, and through YouTube. And let's start it off with both of you, Eduardo and Anurag. Do you have any questions that you want to ask the opponent on this specific topic, something that you feel that they haven't addressed or they haven't delved deeper into? Eduardo, if you want to take it away.
Sure. Well, I'll actually start with something you just said. You said, if we are a free economy, we should do X, Y, Z. So I want to ask you based off that. Well, my question is twofold. If we are really a market economy, a free economy, why do you want the government intervening in the labor market through all of these? I mean, let's just focus on the H-1B, on all of these visa programs, which again is government interference. That's not free market. And you also said that you conceded that jobs, no matter what, are going to flow outside of the U.S. So if jobs are going to be outsourced anyway, why even have an H-1B program where we're importing talent for jobs that are going to be overseas in a couple of years anyway? Isn't that that an outdated attempt and something that's going to hurt Americans in a faster time span anyways?
Yeah, correct. Okay, so let me address the second one first, Eduardo. So look, outsourcing is reality. It is happening. I understand, there should be an extent to which jobs are outsourced, but eventually the cost of doing work, with healthcare and everything, if you hire a worker at 100 in US, there is a $20 overhead. So effectively it costs a bit too much to hire. By the way, outsourcing is a reality in the sense that eventually it might be a transition job. So the Indians, most of the jobs that are being done here are a part of the workforce which might be needed today, but may not be needed 5 years hence. Artificial intelligence, the way it is capturing the entire market, it might need more workers for the next 5 years, but for next 10 years, it might actually need lesser workers. Right? We saw that during pandemic. So point is, there is economics, there is a talent spike that the industry needs. which is, which was the design of H1B, that it is a temporary worker, so it should be used to have temporary jobs, right? Which effectively, I think that is how it should be utilized. It is temporary. I understand some of the people might want to stay here long term, but then that has its own country quotas and everything. So, the green card system takes care of that. Government interference, absolutely, there should not be government interference. The only point is government is the only authority that lets people in or out of the country. So, we can't really escape that reality. So,
well, we can tell the government not to do it. I mean, if this is a democracy, 60% of Americans are against the H-1B, so we could, in effect, push the government out of the program.
There's a third point, Eduardo. Okay. Now, if you are a PhD at MIT, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, and you want to work as a assistant professor or within the same university, what visa you think those guys are using? They're using H-1B. Okay, so
but not everyone is an MIT genius. I mean, a lot of these people are doing jobs. In fact, over 2/3 of H-1Bs are between the ages of 25 and 34, and I'm in that age range, and I don't know a lot of people who would qualify to be leading an entire department at MIT. So,
no, absolutely. And see, that's exactly where the misuse comes in. H-1B doesn't differentiate what college you come from, by the way, and that's a loophole, and that's why it has also been utilized by puppy mill colleges, even in US, right? I totally understand that. But the point is, you can make the program a little smarter, more specific, and that might cut down 50% of the workforce. That's a reality I'm willing to live with. But the point is, if you're a fresher out of college, you can't classify for look, there is a limited credential that a fresh graduate can have from college, right? So there you got to use H-1B. Otherwise, you got to use some other visa if you're a senior enough guy, you are a big researcher, you made name for yourself, that there are other categories for that, which is EB1, which is first preference, right? Which is taken. The point is, again, our energies are diverted towards one visa where 90% of the gate is open for the rest of the world to enter. And plus, 5 times of that is illegal. The point is, we do attack this waterfall, we need to focus energies on the right areas. I'm not trying to ignore the problem. There is a problem and we should capture that right. By the way, this Indian problem has created a problem for Indian population themselves. You know what has happened? Because visa is they can get 75% of the visas, but they cannot get more than 7% of the green cards. There's a country cap there. So what's happening now is Indians are stuck in a loop of 50-year wait to get a green card. Now that itself is a deterrent. And however, that's an injustice to people who are actually good talent and want to come. They also have to wait in the same line. So if we reform the H-1B, it will actually help right talent to come in and not crowd out the line. I'm a big supporter of that, by the way. Real good talent from India today is unable to come because there is a clog of the pipeline.
Well, I guess I would say it sounds like you agree with me then that the H-1B's got a lot of problems. So maybe my work here is done. But I did want to say.
I told you I'm not going to have MSNBC kind of debates, right? I'm going to.
Okay. Well, let me just say the premise. I guess you're talking about the university system, right? And this poor kid who maybe is on a student visa here, and then the only option you're saying is the H-1B for him to continue to stay in this country, or maybe anybody else. Maybe they're not here on a student visa. Okay. But again, I reject this premise that the United States and our economy exist for this poor guy or this poor woman around the world. They just want to come here and have a better life. What about the people within our own borders? We have told, I grew up in a country that told Americans, if you study hard, if you work hard, you pay taxes that fund the education system, you get good grades, you go to a 4-year institution, and you can get a job and have a better life. And we are betraying those people. I mean, there are millions and millions of Americans with STEM degrees who cannot get a job in STEM. So this idea that whether for AI or for whatever other reason, we are going to need more of these workers in the next 5 years for certain advancements, that just doesn't hold up. For example, last year, there were some estimated 150,000 tech workers laid off at some of the biggest tech companies, Google, Microsoft, Apple, you name it. So they are laying off American tech workers at the same time saying that, well, we really need these workers for XYZ. And I'm sorry, it just doesn't add up. Why would you fire tech workers then if you really needed the work? Why not look at the millions of Americans with STEM degrees in this country who would gladly take a job in STEM if they were paid a fair wage and not being undercut by someone who isn't even a citizen? You see what I'm saying?
No, true. So look, I think like most things, truth lies in the middle here, right? I mean, there are about 1 million H-1B, active H-1B working in the country, and I'm telling you 25% definitely are undercutting wages. Outside of that, there are about 500 to 700,000 students who are working on a 3-year OPT, optional practical training extension, even they are undercutting jobs. Like they can't stay in the country unless they have jobs. I understand the design was something else, but I think in proportionality, we have missed a couple of tricks here. But by the way, which is with every category of visa. So we should not be surprised people want to come to US. That's not a surprise at all. The point is we have to plug the loopholes. But at the same time, there was a well-designed purpose behind the visa. To throw the H-1B visa out is like throwing the baby with the bathwater. Like that's not, the point is reform the program, plug the loopholes, and they're simple. By the way, they're pretty simple. The only point is you need a majority in the Congress and all of that, right? But these are pretty simple loopholes. They can be plugged. Maybe some of them are more simple to plug. Have country quotas while allocating visas. One country cannot dominate it. You have that in green cards. Thankfully, that is protected. But you can have country quotas even here. Have the wage limits. By the way, median wage today on H-1B is 118,000. That's not too low.
That's not accurate. That's not accurate, because what that does is that takes the total number of H-1Bs, people who have renewed 2 to 3 times over. If you take a look at the initial applications, in other words, someone who is just trying to apply for the H-1B for the first time, that is much lower. And when you look at Americans, those are who they would be competing with, not someone who's been in the field for 7, 8, 9 years.
So that's where my number comes from, Eduardo. When I say 25%, they're below 75,000. Below 75,000, 25% of the workforce. That probably is a misuse. I will give you that, right? Absolutely. So that's how we got to find out. Ahmed?
Okay, thank you both. Anurag, you get to also ask Eduardo a question if you wanted to.
Yeah. Okay. I thought I asked, but okay, I have one question too, which is, what's your alternative, Eduardo? If I were to ask, what's a guy in Spain, a guy in Germany, and they come to study at one of these Ivy Leagues, and then now they want to study in US and probably stay longer. What's the alternative? O is there, but O is not that easy to get. By the way, it's a pretty small number. And if you say, oh, we'll take only 10,000 through the education route, but we'll take 900 through family, that's not a fair. Then you know what you're getting. So what's your alternative to H-1B?
Sure, and I guess what I would say is what I've said repeatedly throughout, is that it's not the purpose of the United States or the concern of the United States to find a way to make it easier for people around the world to come here, as sympathetic as we may be. Now, if we're talking about truly the geniuses of the world, the Einsteins, any people any immigrant who is really worth their salt will find a way to come here more or less. As far as student visas, people here on student visas, again, the idea of a student coming to work in the United States isn't so that they can come here permanently and live here. I mean, the original intent of a student visa is so that these individuals will come, learn at our top institutions, and go back and make their home countries better. Bill Clinton famously was against brain draining the country of Haiti. He was against skilled immigrants, the United States taking skilled immigrants from Haiti into the country, because he said, and rightfully so, that if we take all the best and brightest of Haiti, the country is going to collapse. And look at what it is now. So again, I don't think we should just be taking anyone who is maybe moderately above the median in their own country, or someone who's, could get a 4-year degree and just invite everyone into the United States. There are a lot of countries around the world that would benefit from keeping those people. As far as getting rid of the H-1B, again, the H-1B exists supposedly because we have a tech shortage. That's a tech worker shortage. That's not true. There's no way that for 30 years we just haven't been able to find the talent. Again, we have millions of people in this country with STEM degrees who are not working in STEM. There are several studies that show that American students in computer science outpace students from any other country. So it's not even a question of our school system and our talent. We have the talent here. And so if the whole visa exists on this false argument that we need these workers, and if we don't, these workers will fall behind, then it's not a question of reform. It's we don't need it anymore.
Okay. So
sorry, Anurag, I do have to jump in because we have a lot of questions that we're waiting on.
Yeah, I have a small, but we can bring that later. Sure.
No worries. Yeah. Fit your response into the following questions. But I'll start with some of the questions, but I'll start with a quick question from myself as the moderator's prerogative. So, Eduardo, this is to your side of the debate. A lot of the rhetoric about the H-1B visa, especially considering the fact that you've both referenced that a lot of the H-1B visa recipients, over 3/3, over 3/4, are Indian. the rhetoric has been laden with some racism against Indians. A lot of derogatory slurs have become very commonplace on Twitter and other social media platforms, targeting Indians as these individuals that are taking our jobs, that are replacing us, replacing the white worker in Silicon Valley. And other accusations follow suit. For example, the accusation that H-1B visas, in turn, hire H-1B visas, Indians working in Silicon Valley, Indian Americans working in Silicon Valley, start this cooperative relationship where they only bring in H-1B visas from India. So what is your response to this accusation that it's a little bit on the racist side, this preoccupation with only 65,000 positions that are being filled by Indians?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say the racism argument with respect is ridiculous. I mean, this is a country that accepts and has accepted people from all over the world, from all different types of cultures and backgrounds. How many more people do we have to accept into the country before people stop calling us racist for opposing something? In other words, we have tens of millions of people, again, in the last 40, 50 years from all over the world. And apparently that is not enough to push aside those arguments of racism. I mean, how many do we have to accept before we are stopped called racist for opposing something? So I just reject that argument. It's not a question of race at all. And in fact, I would say most of the hatred has come from the pro H-1B side. I mean, look at what Vivek Ramaswamy basically said around Christmas, that Americans are just too dumb, their culture is just too stupid, and it's your fault for getting replaced by tech workers. That is what a lot of the rhetoric is. I can only respond to the arguments put forth by the pro H-1B side. And again, for the better part of maybe the program's entire existence, the argument has been, well, Americans just aren't smart enough. Americans just can't do it. They're not talented enough. I think that's far more insulting than, maybe a couple trolls online who are saying something that, I, of course, can't answer or speak for. So that's what I would say about that argument. I don't think it's racial, and I haven't seen anyone, making a reputable argument bring race into it.
Anurag, would you also like to comment on this question?
No, I would tend to agree. No country takes more immigrants than United States. I've come here, I've found the environment extremely welcoming, almost negligible bureaucracy, and great people, right? So my experience is, I don't know what everybody's experience is. My experience is great. By the way, just for record, I did not use H-1B to come here. I used that sliver of 5%. It is called extraordinary talent, but nothing is foolproof. So here we are. By the way, this is just for record. So, and I just thought I should put that out. But
okay,
this racist argument, that's a liberal political argument. It doesn't hold true. It's bogus. The serious question is, does 75% of the real talent lies in India? That the answer is no. I'm telling you, it's misused. It should be plugged. There is no debate on that, right? So racist argument, too bad. I found this American, and I've been to 5 other countries before this. This is the best place, that I have found, and I would, trade this with no other, right?
Okay, so a question for you, Anurag. So it seems like specifically in the 2016 election, when Trump was coming in for the first time, it seemed that the ending of the H-1B visa was a very popular position, and it bolstered him and gave him support to get him to the White House the first time. And then now the accusation is that because he surrounds himself by Silicon Valley billionaires who have personal stakes and personal interests in this program because they hire so many H-1B visas in their companies, and of course that comes with the accusation of using these H-1B visas as indentured servants or slave wage laborers. What is your response to this accusation that the only reason the political will of the American people being against the H-1B visa is being limited is because of certain individuals of interest who have a lot of money, who have a lot of influence on American politics?
So Hekmat, this is a great question. This is exactly what I was trying to ask Eduardo. Look, top 30 companies take 50% of the H-1B employees, right? And this includes big tech, Amazon, Google, Meta. You take all the the mega cap magnificent seven of the Silicon Valley, and then you can also include some of the outsourcing companies from India as well, right? So there are top 30. They employ half of the workforce. This is where look, I understand, but look, business is not government. They can't defer problems. They work on quarterly basis. They have to report every quarter. They work on urgency, right? If there is a demand now, you saw this in pandemic. If they had to hire, trespassers were hired. If they had to let go in 2022, they let go of even the good talent. The point is, businesses can't wait. So you give them temporary workforce, they will get it. They will figure out ways to get it. Some student is willing to work on some extended OPT, or there is H1B. They will try and find workers, fill the space. If they don't get it here, they'll outsource, they'll balance. The point is, we can't defer it indefinitely, saying we will not provide a solution to you, but we will not allow you to hire. These companies have done great work. Amazon is doing great stuff. Google is doing great work. So what if they have 30, 40 H1Bs? That's part of the course, right? The only point from a national perspective is, and now I'm saying from American perspective, we should not allow misuse to happen, because that's unfair to everyone. Today, I'm making the point that real good talent from India today is discouraged to come here because there is no end. He can't get a green card ever, right? So it's only the average ones which are coming. So the cycle is now working in reverse, which is a tyranny, right? So I think we should solve for it, because if we are to get real geniuses, they're certainly now not coming from India. I can assure you that. By the way, slavery argument, it's a sweatshop argument. That's again a bogus liberal argument. I don't buy it. You take our argument of people working in Bangladesh factories, making whatever garments with doing slave labor, sweatshops and all that. By the way, it's not, everything is relative. You ask that guy, that is the best job for him. If you take even that away, he will end up on streets. So the point is, everything is with respect to alternatives. The guy who's coming from India or anywhere on H1B is willing to trade that off. But if he comes here, he is anyways leaps and bounds ahead of where he was. The point is, he's not comparing himself to Musk, but he's better off. So this sweatshop argument, he's willing to pay the price. That's good. Let's look at the American perspective as to what works for America. America doesn't have the responsibility to see what works for the rest of the world. That's not our issue. And I am with Eduardo on that, by the way.
Okay, Eduardo, would you like to comment on the same question?
No, I actually want to comment just quickly something before, just again about the question of discrimination against Indians. I do want to point out that the company Cognizant, a jury found that they actually discriminated against non-Indians who were applying for jobs at that company. So I think we see a lot of the reverse. Again, we see companies discriminated against Americans, whether at the wage level. Apple, the Department of Justice found Apple was posting job applications, even though they posted many of their job applications on the website. A lot of these H-1B jobs, which again, we all think out there, it's a false notion that they're supposed to also try to hire Americans. They had those job postings in some obscure trade papers and things like that, to where Americans can't find those postings. So I think what we see here, I just want to say again, what we see, if anything, in the industry is a discriminatory practices by these companies against American workers. And what my opponent said here, I'll agree with. If you give corporations away, if you give them a means to hire cheaper labor or to use these programs, they're going to use them, and they're going to take advantage of the loophole, which is part of why I think the program should be ended.
All right, thank you both. At this point, let's start taking questions from our audience online. So this is a question coming from CiVL.com. A question for both speakers. Thoughts on the idea that Americans are okay with immigrants working jobs they don't want, but are upset about immigrants filling highly skilled, highly paid jobs. So essentially, it's a question not of the job, but of the salary these immigrants are taking. Whoever wants to take it first.
I guess I'll go first. So, I guess this person is arguing that it's hypocritical that Americans are okay with immigrants doing certain type of jobs but not others. On the first point, I'll push back against that, because the Center for Immigration Studies has looked at this almost every year, information from the Department of Labor, and they find that there is no occupation. There's some, I believe it's over 400 occupations listed by the Department of Labor, and there's not a single one that's dominated completely, in other words, over 50%, by immigrants. So this idea that there's just large industries that Americans don't even work in, or that they're not a majority in, is not true. I do think, to a degree, part of the reason why the H-1B program is more blatant than, say, my colleague pointing out other green card programs, which I agree, chain migration is a problem. The reason why I think the H-1B attracts this particular attention is because, at least unlike those other programs, you don't see people out there saying, well, we got to have chain migration because these people are just like the best and the brightest or whatever. I mean, they're not actually pushing a lie that is so blatant. But that's what we see with the H-1B. They're pushing something that is so demonstrably untrue, something that is so insulting to Americans. And it's, again, it's happening at a level to people who did everything correctly. They did well in school, they went to four-year institutions, and they're being betrayed by corporations and really their own country. So I think that's part of the reason why it gets more attention. I don't think it's hypocritical that maybe we would be okay with certain jobs and not others. I don't really see that being at play here.
Anurag?
Yeah, I think, okay, there's some truth to that. That's a bit of a feminist argument where they say, well, you're not arguing about equal jobs in terms of bricklayers, people who are laying the bricks, but you want board seats, 50% women, right? It's a valid argument. Or, for example, you don't want 50% women in army or whatever, military, but you want 50% board seats. Partly correct, right? The point is, attention will be where there are, there is more money at stake and there are good talent being lost. So I think let's not get lost into the debate on the margins. I think 2.1, I think by the way, on the Cognizant example also, look, there is always 5% fringe, but let's not lose the main argument in terms of, that little fringe on, all sides of the argument, right? But to this question, I think, it doesn't justify if it is a misuse. I'm telling you, I'm taking a very different side here. Indians misusing H-1B has made it difficult for good Indians to come. Now that's an argument that people don't make. I know extremely talented Indians, but they are today working in India because they're saying we can't stay in a country where we have no status. And they are the real bright talent, but they are just crowded out by the average talent. We should solve for it, right? It's a problem, and we should confront it. We should solve it. But at the same time, I acknowledge H-1B gives us good top talent too, because if you're fresher out of college, there's no way but to take H-1B, regardless of country, by the way. Yeah, let's not get all carried away. Okay.
All right. Next question here. It's for you, Eduardo. Considering that 50% or so of the top SBU 500 companies were founded by an immigrant or the son or daughter of an immigrant, how do you write off the impact that such creative value adds to the American economy?
Well, those studies, I have a problem with a lot of those studies because what they'll do is they'll take these large companies. Facebook is a great example, and maybe the company has several different founders. And because one founder on the company may be an immigrant, these studies classify the whole company as immigrant founded. Facebook, again, a great one because Eduardo Saverin, a Brazilian national, was one of the early co-founders. I don't think anyone would claim that Eduardo Saverin is responsible for Facebook's success. It's obviously Mark Zuckerberg. And in fact, when you account for that, those same studies that say it's about 52%, 55%, the real number is actually about 11%. And by the way, I'm not against, it's great. If there's those 10% of immigrants that found these immensely successful companies, that's wonderful. But I think what you'll find through most of our history, like I said before, whether it's the Manhattan Project, whether it's Operation Paperclip, whether it's the fact that America leads the world in Nobel Prize awards in the last 100 years, you'll find that Americans are leading the way. Sure, are there immigrants there alongside with them? Yes. But Americans ultimately lead the way in these groups. As I said with the Nobel Prize winners, most of the American winners in the last 100 years, an overwhelming majority, were not immigrants. And so were there immigrants in that group? Yes. But their success wasn't because we opened the floodgates to any worker who wanted to come into this country with the hopes that one of them is a Nobel Prize winner, one of them ends up becoming a founder of a great S&P 500. That the success isn't because of that. And so again, I would just dispute those studies. I think they try to tweak the numbers and make it seem like if there was just one immigrant founder in some of these huge companies, that it was totally founded by an immigrant, when I think you'll find that Americans often lead the way.
Okay, Anurag, would you like to comment?
Yeah. So look, that's well argued by Eduardo. So no debates on that. Look, this is a false argument again. The idea is there will always be exceptions. Look, let's take a good school. Like, why doesn't Yale admit everybody who applies? They have to look at a record and look at a probability of success. Does everybody who Yale, gets into Yale makes it very big? Well, probably most do, but some do not. But that doesn't mean that everybody that Yale rejects are bad. Well, some of them might make it very big, but that doesn't mean that we should change the criteria. We always should select. Point is, You can make a fake argument saying, oh, there are 5 million illegal immigrants came in. Look, 30-year back, this guy came in illegally and he's doing very great. Exceptions don't prove the rule. We are better off going by the rules and letting that maybe one Elon Musk out of the 5 million illegals who are entering in. We are better off taking that trade off rather than just saying one exception justifies that we take everybody in. I think that's a fair argument. Yeah, I'm on the same side on this one.
Okay, we'll take another then. This one is on, I believe, on our YouTube. I wonder if the real elephant in the room is the deterioration of education and workforce training in the US, which may be the underlying reason why we have to rely so heavily on foreign workers. Question for both debaters.
Let me take this. Look, US standards are great, but you can always find pockets, right? This is not a homogeneous society like a Europe or a where France, where 90% are French, or there are countries there where there's much more homogeneity. US is a heterogeneous country. You can always find pockets, but on the total, the education system is best and maybe world, of course, probably the best in the world. Actually, the best in the world, I would say. The point is, there is a resurgence of tech, and in the short term, maybe 20 years down the line, we won't be discussing this problem. Like there was resurgence in oil industry, in 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s, or auto industries in 60s, 70s, right? That needed a lot of labor. Today, steel plants, auto plants, manufacturing plants have become so efficient. They can produce 10 times more steel with 1/10 of the labor. Tomorrow, maybe if the driverless cars come in, we won't even need 3 million drivers who are driving trucks on US roads, right? The point is, in the short term, there is some resurgence of labor. The economics recommends that somebody fulfills that job. Today, that trucking job is being fulfilled by some of the workers, which, by the way, famously, Yuval Harari says that in 20 years, we'll have a generation which will be pretty useless. A lot of useless, he uses that word provocatively, that there will be a lot of useless people who will not have the skills to do anything, because most of the good stuff is automated and otherwise very high tech or high expertise driven, but all the common jobs are mostly taken. So we'll be serving hamburgers to each other. So the point is, ultimately, short-term demand surge, we need to find ways. It might be in agriculture, we need to find agriculture labor. It might be in healthcare, in nurses. They're coming from Philippines. They're not coming from India, by the way, they're coming from Philippines. We need to staff that, right? So the point is, we need to balance both, right? Temporary surge of working workers in an industry is a reality. We can't shy away from that. If we don't provide a solution, government doesn't provide, industry will find a way. And that will be probably mostly, some legal, some illegal.
Well, Eduardo, would you like to comment or take another question? Go.
Yes,
take it,
I would.
Take it away.
On the issue of performance standards in education, again, I invite people to look at the United Kingdom and Canada. Those were countries that believed, well, if we import the world's so-called best and brightest, then we will see growth and we will create our own Silicon Valleys. But it didn't work. I mean, Canada doesn't have a Silicon Valley. England isn't exactly leading the world in anything. And on the idea of actual top student performers, in 2019, the National Academy of Sciences did a study. Instead of saying, let's look at the overall U.S. education system or the education system of this country or that country, which, by the way, I would more than happily admit, obviously, we have issues with education and we should improve those. But what this study did was it took computer science fourth year, in other words, seniors, computer science majors in the United States, and compared them to the equivalent in China, Russia, and India. And not only did the Americans outperform them by large numbers, but the study even found that computer science students at mid-level American schools performed better than 80% of the students in those other countries. So it's not a question of we're failing our own students in the areas of STEM. I mean, we have to remember this is a very niche field. This isn't looking at broad education. This isn't looking at liberal arts or woke this or woke that. We're talking about something very specific: science, technology, engineering, and math. And despite whatever problems people may think about the system, the point is, even if you go to a mid-tier school here in the United States, you are performing better than 80% of the people at some of our chief rivals, India, China, and Russia. And that's what the study found. And so, I would dispute this notion that we just don't have the talent or the systems in place to train the talent here in this country.
All right, well, this might be a technical question. Hopefully both of you would have an answer. Indians are gaining admission into taxpayer-funded university grad schools programs not with engineering degrees, but with B.Tech degrees from low, non-globally ranked tech schools? Should universities reject Indian students without B English degrees? This is a technical one. I don't know if Anurag or Eduardo, you'd have a comment on that.
I can take a shot at this. Indian workers, by the way, there's something called as international category, right, of students when universities admit. They have in fact started special programs, so-called master's programs, where all you find is 50% of the class is from India and 50% is from China. They're running special classes with full tuition. And by the way, there are some like top of the top schools there in this bucket as well. It's a commercial model. People will, the point, by the way, what's my contract when I come as a student to the United States? I say, I'm coming to study, I'll study and I'll go back to my country. That's the official contract. Colleges say, well, welcome, come here, study in my university. Only Indians and Chinese, that's fine, but we've created a course, you study. That's not a problem. Colleges, there is a model, colleges will charge full fees and exploit it. I don't think they're getting scholarships or anything on that. So there's no government money getting transferred there. I don't think that's the case. That said, if Princeton is admitting student, by the way, I'm just naming random schools, but just to make a point, if Princeton admits 90% of the students from United States, I think 10% should be international, because that much we have to give that there is a global talent. And that 10% is very well distributed. It's not one country, India, China. It's reasonably, despite more applicants from China and India, it's reasonably well distributed, right? So I think that's a good game where people come here and then go back and study spread the American mindset. We should have a problem if the scholarships are being used to subsidize them. I don't think that's the case, Hekmat, at least. I'm clear about that.
You'd like to comment, Eduardo? Or
yeah, I would just say quickly, this is true, by the way, not just about Indians or foreign nationals with B.Tech degrees, but it's true across the board that universities, the same universities that will accept foreign nationals with B.Tech degrees, won't accept Americans with those same degrees. And the answer for that, the reason is very obvious. Universities are now in the business of making money, and so they are more than willing to exploit any loopholes to admit any student if it will make them more money. And that's part of the problem with foreign students, is that they pay more, they pay higher tuition than American citizens. And honestly, I mean, if you really believe out there that every foreign student we're letting into this country is just smarter than their peers attending that university, I mean, I have a bridge in Russia to sell you. I mean, it's absurd, and it's just not accurate.
Okay, let me counter you. Look, and this goes to the whole education debate and why the colleges are raising fees. You have a choice to, again, education loans, and it goes to that controversial territory. When you took an education loan, whatever, went to college, you had a choice to take it or not to take it. So if international students are willing to spend the money, it's a business for universities. If they are private, they're going to do it. The point is, government should just make sure that nobody is being shortchanged in the system. Government doesn't.
Yes, they are. American students are being shortchanged.
No, but they're not. I mean, they can join the course, just that they're not willing to pay 85,000 per year.
No, that's not true. A lot of them can't even get in. I went to high school with kids who had straight A's who couldn't get into state schools that they funded with their taxpayer money for 20 years and that their parents funded, and they can't get in because any international student with some fake degree from some fake high school in Latin America or Asia or whatever can get in because they pay more. So of course there are people getting shortchanged.
Let me counter this with this term called grade inflation. In 1960s, maybe 5% of the class got A's. This is, by the way, again, Ivy League data. I might be here and there a little bit on the numbers, but broadly correct. That Yale class, 1960s, got to be 15% used to get A's. 80s, about 30% were getting A's. Today at Yale, 85% of the passing class gets an A. There is a grade inflation, all A's and not getting into, I mean, that's not an argument, by the way. But the point is, look, we are talking, I don't know what colleges, we can't have a specific discussion unless we have specific college in mind. But colleges should be free. It's a free market. You should be allowed to run any course. And if people are paying $85,000 for a course in fashion design, let them pay. The point is, I mean, it's free for everyone.
But it's not a free market. The promise of this.
But if you say government should subsidize me for that, now that's a illiberal argument. Eduardo, sorry, go ahead.
Every university, including private ones, gets some sort of government money. And when you grow up in a country, when your tax dollars fund those universities, funds the research that comes out of them. It's not a free market to say that, oh, you went through our school system for 18 years. We promised you that if you did well, you can go to school. But oops, we changed our mind now because some kid halfway around the world who we can't even really verify their academic credentials, but we know they'll pay 20, 30, 40% more than you will. Sorry, that's just the free market for you. I mean, the same argument could be applied with what we're talking about, the H-1Bs. I mean, if the argument is that any worker around the world is now fair game, don't think for a second that your job couldn't be replaced by someone who will do it for half the price. That is true all over the world. And so I'm sorry, the promise of the free market isn't so that companies, universities, whatever it may be, can undercut the people who grew up here and who are part of this country for someone who didn't even grow up here or isn't even from here. I mean, I think the whole system would collapse, and that's part of what we're seeing.
Anurag, I'll let you throw in one last comment, and then I'll ask a question.
I think Eduardo is turning a little bit left from the libertarian stand, I would say, but let's move on.
No, you're the one that wants control, the government interfering in the labor market with visas. That's not very free market of you.
Okay. But,
All right, well, speaking of the free market, we have a question that's pretty spicy here. It's poorly worded, so I will try my best to reword it here. It's about Palmer Luckey, the founder of Anduril, who recently did a podcast with Sean Ryan, in which he described his approval of the H-1B visa, and not just his approval, but his willingness to weaponize the H-1B visa against America's enemies and adversaries in the globe. Essentially weaponizing the H-1B visa to steal talent from industries that are competitive in China or in Iran or in Russia. What is the view of the two debaters on this specific notion of weaponization of brain drain in the sense of these high talent, high skill visas?
Sure, I'll go first real quick. I think that's really wishful thinking. I mean, it's a nice idea if you've watched maybe too many movies and you think that there's just all these people willing to defect, and just by the nature of them coming into the United States, they become super patriotic and they love this country. That isn't exactly what's happened. There was a top Google engineer who was found to be commuting between Beijing and the United States, and he was stealing some of Google's top AI secrets. He was someone we let in. There's a Chinese math genius, Yao Xingtong. He was the first Chinese winner of the prestigious Fields Medal. He was running the math department at Harvard. This is someone we let in, and he actually quit his position at Harvard to go to China, and he said, I'm going to make China the powerhouse of mathematics over the next decade. So I think this idea that, oh, if you just let people in, they will automatically love your country, that's not true. And this is a result of cheapening the idea of what it means to become an American. Over the last 30, 40 years, we've told people around the world, just come here and use the United States to get a better life. Come here to improve your economic standing and get a better job than you would in your home country. And when you allow people to see your country as just an economic vehicle and not a place, not a culture, not something where you want them to respect your values, it just cheapens their understanding and their commitment to this country. They have no commitment. And as I said before, we've seen what brain drain does around the world. We've seen it in Haiti. I fear that's happening right now with Venezuela. And so, it's nice to think that let's help defectors of the regime come to our country and be loyal. And even if they do end up being loyal, which many Venezuelan Americans are, many of them are very successful down here where I live in South Florida, the problem is them coming here has now guaranteed basically that country will never return to a normal functioning country, because anyone with education, skills, or the finances to turn that country around is now here in the United States. And so what in effect you're doing is destroying other third world developing countries around the world that we end up having to deal with the problems of. In the case of Venezuela, we deal with the immigration problem, we deal with the crime, we deal with these issues one way or another, and I'm not sure that brain drain is the solution.
Anurag?
Yeah. So just to clarify, the question is that we are doing, America is doing a brain drain from other countries, correct?
Yeah, essentially about weaponization of brain drain.
It is too much of Netflix out here. Look, I really, by the way, the point is, if everybody, will find their own ways, right? Will South Africa be a developed nation at some point in time? I don't know. But if I'm in South Africa and I have limited time span of 25 years of career, 30 years of career, and I find this is too slow for me and I don't like it, I'll find way to come to places which welcome me and I'll go. US is not doing any brain drain. People are coming to, there's no strategy around here, right? By the way, and certainly H-1B is not a way to do a brain drain. By the way, let that be very clear. It's skill talent, it is good talent, but it is not Einstein talent. It's not a top of the top talent, right? That's different category.
We agree.
So, right? Absolutely. It's not that 4%, 30, 40,000 per year, right? So that's very limited. It's not in bulk. It's the normal run-of-the-mill workers that you need for the time being. That's temporary. So yeah, this argument doesn't stand, right? And no, there's no strategy like that, right? And it's just fake argument. And by the way, if a country is good enough, there will be some good enough people left there who will resolve the country, right? So, and third, this is again that argument of, oh, we got to save democracy in Ukraine or some other country. It's not America's problem. Let that country sort itself out. Every other country's challenge or talent or brain drain is not America's problem.
All right. Thank you both. That was a lively question and answer segment. And thank you all who are watching online. We have a lot of questions that came in. And I'm sorry, we have to cut them short and go into our closing remarks at this point. Eduardo, you have 5 minutes for your closing remarks.
Thanks so much.
Please take it away.
I want to close tonight the way I began. To be clear, it should be the express purpose of any country, but especially the United States, to prioritize the wants and needs of its own citizens over what is good or beneficial for other nations or multinational corporations. This isn't controversial. If you believe in the idea of nationhood, then it's obvious why nation citizens can and should come first. The H-1B is no different. It's difficult to find ways the program has actually benefited this country, but the number of ways Americans have been hurt by the program are numerous and concrete. The ideas that American workers are lesser than and should or can be discriminated against and replaced aren't just gross ideas. They're false and they should be rejected. This is the country of Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Edison. We have always been inventors and pioneers, both literally and in many different fields of science and technology. We were the #1 nation and economy in the world before the H-1B, and we will continue to be without it. Americans invented the first airplane. We put a man on the moon. Our history shows that when our people put their minds to something, anything is possible. America has led the world in Nobel Prize awards. In the last 100 years, as I said earlier tonight, most of those winners were not immigrants. And the amazing immigrants in the US who did win a Nobel Prize on our behalf, or who helped contribute to any technological and scientific advancements in our country, didn't do so because we opened the floodgates to every entry-level worker in the world who we thought could maybe become great. Ultimately, the American dream is much more than just economics. Again, the point I've tried to drill home tonight is, our country isn't an economic zone or a vehicle for the rest of the world to extract value, to use to improve the lives of their own people or their own countries. And while we can sympathize with these people, that's not and shouldn't be our purpose. The American dream is also about our culture, our values, and what should exist, and the promise of it should exist for those within our own borders than those outside of them. Our talent in this country is limitless. Before anybody tonight tries to convince themselves that we have to go halfway around the world to find someone to do an entry-level tech job, ask yourself this: why aren't we investing here in America? Why aren't we scouring middle America for the next Luke Ferritor, one of the geniuses on Elon Musk's Doge team, most of which, if not all, are Americans, by the way? Why aren't we looking for the next J.D. Vance? That talent is here in America. And I'm going to assume here tonight a little bit, too, that most of the Young Voices audience that here is libertarian, as it is a libertarian organization. And so to you, I would just like to say, as libertarians, why do you support government intervention in the labor market? Why would you support that? That is the opposite of market capitalism. The H-1B visa, like other visas, is the government tipping the scales for the benefit of the select few. And last thing I'll say about this is, I don't have anything to gain from taking the position that I do on this issue. I don't work in STEM. I'm not angry that I didn't get a job in STEM. I don't stand to benefit financially or even personally by opposing the H-1B. Conversely, there are many H-1B advocates out there who have a vested financial interest in improving the bottom lines of their companies. Others want their friends and families to come and be able to work into the United States. And again, I don't necessarily begrudge someone for taking a position of which they have a strong interest, but they should at least disclose those conflicts. And that's the problem in the national debate right now. Many of them are not. I simply care about my fellow Americans who are being discriminated against and attacked. Few of these American tech workers have the outlets, platforms, or advocates to push back against these near universal smears. So if you came into this debate tonight thinking that you may disagree with me, or maybe you believe in some of the arguments put forth by the pro-H-1B side, I hope I have moved the needle for you. I hope I have explained how nearly every argument put forth by their side is based on a falsehood. Again, that Americans just aren't good enough and that we just don't have the talent. And in my view, they make these arguments because the one that they really want to make is too blatant. They can't do it. And the truth is that what they really want is an unrelenting stream of cheap labor to improve their corporate bottom lines. That's why the top companies in this country support it. And so if you really believe in our country, if you believe in our people, and you believe in the talent that we have here, you should oppose the H-1B program. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. Anurag, you have 5 minutes. Take it away.
Okay, good. Good again. Very spirited. I think valid argument. By the way, of corporate bottom line, I think that the bad guys are, with the H1 guys. I think people like me who look at bottom line. By the way, so okay, now you've heard both sides of the argument. I think you get the whole picture. One argument is beyond debate: to encourage some global talent to immigrate to US, you to allow them to work here. And you to allow them to work here, you need to give them some visa. You can call it H1B, H1C, H1D, whatever. But you need to give them some pathway to work. The number can be discussed, it can be debated, but you cannot say we are shut to the world. So some way has to be, because ultimately it is getting you still educated, better educated immigrants versus the chain migration / diversity / lottery / asylum, all of that. Naysayers will make the argument that it is misused, but some of that could be capped. Misuse can be corrected, and I'm sure misuse happens in every visa, right? And it is happening across the categories. We should plug that too. Median compensation, we've already spoken about. People who are getting 150,000, they're not undercutting anyone, right? So there is a merit there, right? And if all the companies, even the big tech is hiring talent, there is a way. By the way, if the government is not controlling the number of visas to 85,000, trust me, the corporates will issue 1 million visas every year. So it is good that the government is here, at least in some sense. So now, do we have a protection against H-1B? Well, in some sense we have, because if a country misuses H-1B to get a visa to the country, well, they can't misuse it to get the green card and permanent residency, because there is a country quota of cap of 77%. Maybe we should have a similar cap even while giving visas, right? So maybe that's a cap. Maybe we should have limited number of renewals, right? We can solve all of those caps. We can plug the loopholes. But as I conclude, this, I want you to think of this choice for a moment. You are an American. You have 1 million people getting into the country legally every year. You have two buckets. You have 85% of the people where you have no education or skills criteria. They're just part of the family. They're connected. In fact, most of them do not actually speak the language. What kind of a citizenry are we trying to build here? And that's 850,000 per year. We don't have to prove this. I told you I named the countries where they're coming from, right? Forget the language. I doubt they even align with the American work ethic or the values, right? So that's my bigger problem. That's where I want to focus. Forget paying taxes. Most in this 85% group are likely to get on Medicare and Medicaid just after getting their citizenship. This, when they haven't even contributed one single penny to the Social Security or paid any taxes to the government. Why are we letting this happen? On the other hand, the second bucket is that 15% of which 10% is H-1B. They pay taxes, they contribute towards Social Security, they bring families who have a DNA of education, skills. They are one of the best in their countries. At least they are, okay, if you take the misuse out, they are one of the best in their countries. Now, given these two buckets that you to pick from, who would you rather choose? What kind of immigrants would you rather let in? I think the answer is very obvious. Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience, all of you.
Thank you both for a lively debate. Really appreciate it. We have 1,000 people watching on CiVL, 1,000 watching on X, and many more watching on YouTube. So thank you to all who tuned in. At this point, I'll invite you to take your phones out one more time and give us your second vote for the night, so we can see whether you've changed your mind or you have remained on your same position, or you're still undecided on the topic at hand, which is the Trump administration should end the H-1B visa program. So please go ahead, take your phones out and scan this QR code and give us your final vote for the night. As you do so, I'll go through some of our notes here. Please go to CiVL.com, register for free. They have an amazing library of live debates, exclusive documentaries, and much more. They have a great content library that I would highly advise you test out for free. And we have our own next debate coming March 18th. It's going to be on the subject of anti-Semitism on campus. on college campuses, especially after the October 7th attack. So we would love it if you follow us, Join Young Voices on Twitter, follow me at WhatTheHeckMut, and follow CiVL.com to get all updates on future debates. And let's see how we're doing for the vote. All right. We seem to be getting a lot of votes. Excellent. We'll give it a little bit more time. As I give you some more time, I want to thank the two debaters one more time, Anurag and Eduardo. Excellent debate, civil debate, as we always expect and hope for in this specific platform. So really want to extend a gratitude for sharing your point of views in a civilized and respectable manner. Thank you both.
Yes, thank you both as well. Thank you for moderating, Hekmat, and it was a great debate.
Yeah.
Excellent.
By the way, I'm curious, what was the results before the debate started? What was the breakup? Yeah.
I will share them right now. I will share the results right now. All right, at this point, let me close the voting and share the results. All right, so we started off with the agree gaining 9 points and the disagree gaining 12 points, undecided around 8. So 31% for agree, 41% for disagree, 27% for undecided. Now we've moved for the post-debate to 11 votes, gaining 2 for the agree, so 47.83% of the vote, 6 for the disagree, and 6 for the undecided. So it seems that the agree, the proposition side, Eduardo, you've gained 16% of the vote. Congratulations, you have won the debate. And thank you both again for an excellent debate, well thought out, well argued. All right, so appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you soon in another one.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Good, thank you.
All right, thank you all for tuning in tonight for our debate, and we will see you for a future one, we hope.